I worked myself to exhaustion for 4 years so my fiancée could become a lawyer. The night she passed the bar, she looked at me and walked away, saying I no longer belonged in her world. Months later, during a routine food delivery, a dying woman recognized my name and asked me to sit. Then she said one sentence that made my hands go cold. Before we go any further, support the channel, subscribe and share where you're watching from so I can see the path this story takes. For 4 straight years, my life ran on alarms and caffeine. At 4:10 a.m., my phone vibrated under the pillow so it wouldn't wake her. I slipped out of bed quietly, joints stiff, muscles screaming before the day even began. I washed my face in cold water, pulled on work clothes already stiff with yesterday's dust, and made breakfast for her before sunrise, eggs, toast, coffee in her favorite mug. I left notes sometimes. Nothing dramatic. Just reminders that someone believed in her. By 5 o'clock, I was driving toward the construction site on the east side, where unfinished buildings rose out of the ground like skeletons. Concrete dust coated everything. My hands cracked no matter how many gloves I went through. I worked until my palms burned and my shoulders shook, pouring foundations and hauling materials heavier than I should have been lifting on 4 hours of sleep. Construction ended at 6. Most guys went home. I didn't. I drove straight across town to a distribution warehouse that came alive at night. Bright lights, endless beeping, forklifts weaving like insects. From 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., I stacked pallets and loaded trucks until my lower back screamed and my legs went numb. When that shift ended, I sometimes sat in my truck with my head against the steering wheel, breathing slowly until the dizziness passed. Weekends belonged to food delivery. Rain, snow, heat, it didn't matter. I drove until my eyes burned and my hands cramped around the wheel. Every tip went into one place, her future. Her name was Lena Whitford. Brilliant. Focused. Always planning. She talked about career paths and professional circles the way other people talked about weather. She had lists for everything, goals, timelines, contacts. She said I was her foundation. Said she couldn't do it without me. I believed her because belief gave meaning to pain. When she got accepted into a competitive graduate program downtown, I dropped my own night classes without hesitation. Business management could wait. Her opportunity couldn't. I told myself we were a team, that someday we'd stand together on the other side of all this. My coworker Jared saw through it before I did. He worked construction beside me, older than me, 2 kids, hands like stone. He watched me stagger onto the site every morning, eyes hollow, hands shaking. "You're burning yourself out for someone climbing past you," he said one afternoon as we laid rebar. "She's studying," I replied automatically. "When she finishes, we both win." Jared shook his head slowly. "Investments are supposed to return something." Lena never saw the worst of it. She never saw me vomiting behind the site trailer from exhaustion. Never saw me sleeping in my truck because driving home wasted time. Never saw me counting exact change for instant noodles because every spare dollar went toward her textbooks, exam fees, and professional clothes. The night she passed her licensing exam, I thought we'd made it. I traded shifts with 2 drivers. Bought flowers from a real florist instead of the grocery store. Even splurged on imported champagne I couldn't afford. She was celebrating with classmates at a high-end restaurant downtown, linen napkins, valet parking, menus without prices. I walked in wearing my cleanest shirt, heart pounding with pride. One of her classmates noticed me first. She smirked and said something loud enough for the table to hear about, the delivery guy showing up early. The table went quiet. Lena didn't correct her. She didn't stand. Didn't smile. Outside, under the glow of expensive lighting and luxury cars, she folded her arms like she was bracing for a conversation she'd already decided. "I need someone on my level now," she said calmly. This was never going to work long term. 4 years collapsed into one sentence. She explained it like logistics. How her world was changing. How appearances mattered. How clients and colleagues wouldn't understand someone who worked with his hands. She said she appreciated everything I'd done, but appreciation didn't equal obligation. She handed the ring back like it was inconvenient. I drove home in silence with unopened champagne on the passenger seat and understood something too late. Some people don't love sacrifice, they consume it. 3 months later, I was living alone in a studio above a closed storefront. The radiator clanged all night. The walls smelled faintly of old grease and cleaning chemicals. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I cut back to one job, food delivery, because it required the least emotion. Just directions, doors, receipts. No dreams involved. That Tuesday night, the order came through just after 9. 1 chicken soup. 1 packet of crackers. Delivery location, Hospice Wing, Silverwood Care Residence. I almost declined it. Long drive. Barely any payout. But something about the order made me accept. The building was quiet in a way that felt intentional, like everyone inside was whispering out of respect. The nurse at the desk gave me a soft smile when I said the name on the order. "She's very weak," she said gently. "If she's asleep, just leave it." I walked down the dim hallway, past half-open doors and muted televisions. Room 247 was at the end. I knocked softly. "Come in," a voice said, thin, but clear. The woman in the bed was small, almost swallowed by blankets, but her eyes were sharp. Alert. They locked onto my name tag the moment I stepped inside. Her breath caught. Then she whispered my mother's name. No one had said that name to me in years. Tears filled her eyes as she asked me to sit. Said she'd been looking for me for decades. Said my mother had trusted her with something meant for me, something that had waited until I was old enough to understand. I didn't know it yet, but that quiet hospice room was about to expose why my life had been built on struggle, and why everything I'd lost was about to mean something far greater than I ever imagined. I sat down because my legs stopped working. That was the only reason. The woman's hand shook as she reached for the tissue box, and I leaned forward without thinking, placing it closer to her bed. Up close, she looked impossibly fragile, but there was nothing fragile about her eyes. They were sharp, focused, like someone who had waited a very long time for this exact moment. "You look just like her," she whispered. "Not in the face. In the way you hold yourself." My throat tightened. "You knew my mother?" She let out a broken laugh. "I held you the day you were born." The room tilted. "I was her night nurse," she continued, her voice gaining strength as if memory was fueling her body. "Labor and delivery. Silveridge Medical. Your mother came in knowing something was wrong. She felt it. Doctors told her she was anxious, that first-time mothers always are. But she knew. I stared at the floor, afraid if I looked at her I'd fall apart. "She asked me to promise something," the woman said. "She said if anything happened, I was to protect what she left behind until you were old enough to understand why." What did she leave?" I asked. Instead of answering, she reached into the drawer of her nightstand with trembling fingers and pulled out a small chain. A single brass key hung from it, dull with age. "I've carried this for 35 years, she said. "Moved houses with it. Changed my name. Changed jobs. But I never let it leave my sight." My heart pounded so loudly I thought she could hear it. "She told me you had to be grown," the woman went on. "Old enough to know the difference between love and leverage. Old enough not to trade yourself away for someone else's ambition." The words landed like a blow. "You're 32 now," she said softly. "Aren't you?" I nodded. She smiled, the kind of smile that hurts to witness. "Then it's time." She told me my mother's name before marriage. Elena Rothwell. The name meant nothing to me, and everything at once. "The Rothwells own more property in this state than most developers combined," she said. "Commercial blocks. Medical facilities. Logistics centers. Old money. Quiet money." I shook my head. "That's not possible. My dad worked maintenance. We barely scraped by." "Because he loved her," she replied. "And she loved him enough to walk away from everything." She explained slowly, carefully, as if afraid I might break. "My mother had grown up in a world of marble floors and private schools. When she fell in love with my father, then a contracted technician at one of her family's properties, her parents gave her an ultimatum. Money or love. She chose love. They told her she was throwing her life away," the woman said. "She told them she was finally choosing it." I felt something hot and sharp rise in my chest. "She never planned to go back," the woman continued. "But she was also smarter than they ever gave her credit for." She reached for a thick envelope from beneath the mattress, its edges yellowed with time. "This is what she trusted me with." My hand shook as I took it. Inside were documents. Trust agreements. Investment statements. A handwritten letter on cream-colored paper. "Read the letter first," she said. I unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, careful. Maternal in a way that made my chest ache. "My dearest son. If you're reading this, it means I didn't survive to hold you, and I'm so sorry for that. I knew something was wrong before anyone else did. A mother always knows. I need you to understand this first, you did not cost me my life. You gave it meaning. I had to stop. My vision blurred. I chose love when I walked away from my family's wealth. I chose your father knowing it meant starting from nothing, and I never once regretted it. But I also wanted to make sure you would never have to sacrifice yourself for someone who only values what you can provide." She explained the trust. Her grandmother had left her an independent inheritance, untouchable by her parents. My mother arranged for it to transfer to me decades later, timed so I'd receive it only after becoming my own person. "Money given too early becomes a leash," she wrote. "Money given too late becomes freedom." She'd also invested quietly. Carefully. Technology stocks. Logistics firms. Companies people dismissed early. I don't know what it will be worth when you read this, the letter continued. But I hope it gives you choices. I looked up, my breath shallow. How much? I asked. The woman swallowed. As of last quarter, just over 40 million. The number didn't register. 40 million. I laughed once, short and sharp, because my brain refused to accept it. That can't be real. It is, she said. And it's been waiting for you. I thought of Lena. Her words. On my level. The irony made my hands curl into fists. Why didn't my father tell me? I asked. The woman's expression softened. I think he was protecting you. He wanted you loved for who you were, not what you might inherit. He wanted you to grow without entitlement. She reached for my hand. And you did. We talked for hours. About my mother. About her laugh. About the way she'd rub her stomach late at night and talk to me before I was born. About the fear she carried quietly, knowing she might not survive. She wasn't afraid of dying, the woman said. She was afraid you'd grow up believing you weren't enough. When I left that night, the envelope sat on my passenger seat like it might vanish if I blinked. The city looked different. Not richer. Not brighter. Just clearer. The next morning, I walked into a private bank branch wearing the same jacket I delivered food in. The manager's posture changed the moment he read the documents. Suddenly, I wasn't invisible. The box had been untouched for decades. Inside were photos of my parents on their wedding day. My mother glowing. My father staring at her like she was the sun. Jewelry wrapped carefully with notes explaining each piece. My mother's engagement ring. And legal confirmations for the trust transfer. The lawyer's office was worse. The firm Lena worked for represented one of the minor Rothwell subsidiaries. They didn't recognize me. Not until the paperwork went through. I didn't contact Lena. I didn't need to. There was something more important forming inside me. Understanding. I hadn't been abandoned. I'd been protected. And the level I'd been told I didn't belong to? It had never been the right one to begin with. I returned to the hospice every night until the woman passed. Held her hand the way she'd held my mother's. Her last words were simple. Tell her I kept my promise. I paid for her funeral. No headlines. No spectacle. Just respect. By the time Lena heard rumors, it was too late. I didn't block her. I didn't answer. I let silence do the work. And as the foundation of my new life settled into place, I realized something quietly powerful. The people who measure worth by status never see it coming when the ground shifts beneath them. The money didn't change me overnight. That surprised people later, when they found out. They expected a switch to flip, new clothes, new apartment, a sudden appetite for luxury. Instead, I kept delivering food for another 2 weeks. Not because I needed the money, but because I needed time. Time to let the truth settle into my bones without turning me into someone unrecognizable. Every delivery felt different now. Not lighter. Heavier. I noticed how often people didn't make eye contact. How often they said, leave it at the door, but still cracked it open just enough to grab the bag without speaking. I noticed which houses smelled like fresh paint and which smelled like loneliness. I noticed the elderly man who always ordered 2 meals and froze one, just in case. And I noticed how invisible I had been. Not poor, invisible. That mattered. The lawyers moved quickly once the trust was activated. Too quickly, honestly. Documents flew across my phone faster than my brain could keep up. Accounts transferred. Holdings consolidated. My name appeared on statements I barely recognized as real. But the most unsettling moment wasn't seeing the balance. It was hearing people say Mr. Rothwell for the first time. I corrected them every time. That's not my name. They smiled politely and nodded, but I could tell they didn't understand. Names meant lineage to them. Titles. Position. But my name had been forged elsewhere, in work boots and sleepless nights, in cheap apartments and promises kept. I used the money carefully. First, I made sure every remaining bill tied to my father was settled. Old hospital charges. Utility debts. A storage unit he'd forgotten about. Inside it, I found boxes of handwritten notes, his reminders to himself. Grocery lists. Oil change dates. A folded receipt from the day I was born, saved for no reason other than sentiment. Then I took care of the woman who had kept my mother's secret alive. Private nurses. A larger room with windows. Fresh flowers every day. I didn't tell her the numbers. She didn't ask. She just smiled every time I visited, like her promise was finally complete. After she passed, something inside me hardened, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I wasn't going to disappear quietly into wealth. I also wasn't going to announce myself. I wanted something better. I started with one building. Not a mansion. Not a penthouse. A small commercial property near the east side, 3 floors, aging infrastructure, Tenants who'd been there for years and were terrified of rent hikes. I bought it through a holding company, quietly. The first letter the tenants received wasn't a notice of increase. It was a reduction. 5% across the board. 10 for the ground floor businesses. One shop owner cried when I visited in person. "You don't do that," he said. "Landlords don't do that." "I'm not most landlords," I replied. Word spread. Not publicly. Personally. Then I created something new. A non-profit. I named it Elena's Table. Not after wealth. After warmth. We delivered meals to hospice patients, the elderly, and the housebound. No income requirements. No applications. Just people who needed dignity near the end of their stories. I paid drivers well. Full benefits. Flexible hours. I hired people I recognized, warehouse workers, construction guys, former delivery drivers who knew what it meant to be overlooked. Jared was my first call. "You're joking," he said when I told him the salary. "I'm not," I replied. "And you don't have to destroy your body anymore." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I always knew you were built different." I didn't tell Lena. I didn't have to. She found out anyway. Not from me, but from the firm. Her firm handled paperwork for one of the Rothwell subsidiaries, and my name surfaced during a routine compliance check. It wasn't dramatic. No announcement. Just a whispered realization passed between partners. She called me 17 times. Texted explanations. Apologies. Rewrites of history. I read none of them. Instead, I bought the building her firm rented. Not to evict them. Not to intimidate. Just to own the ground beneath their feet. Every month, her firm paid rent to a holding company that routed back to me. She never knew. And that was the point. One evening, months later, I ran into her accidentally. Coffee shop. Early morning. She was dressed sharp, phone glued to her ear, frustration etched into her posture. She froze when she saw me. I saw calculation flicker across her face, memory colliding with rumor. "Ryan," she said. "Hi, Lena. You look different." I smiled. "You too." She hesitated. "Can we talk?" I looked at my watch. "I'm on my way to a delivery." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Her eyes darted to my jacket. "You're still doing that?" "Yes." She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, she didn't know which version of me she was speaking to. "I hope you're doing well," she said finally. "I am," I replied. And meant it. I walked away before she could ask more. Because some chapters don't need closure, they just need distance. As Elena's Table expanded, I saw what money could do when it wasn't trying to prove anything. Hospice nurses told me families slept better knowing meals would arrive. Elderly men told me the soup tasted like something their wives used to make. Drivers told me it was the first job where they felt seen. And through it all, I felt grounded. Not elevated. Grounded. I visited my mother's old neighborhood once. Walked past the building where she'd grown up. Marble steps. Iron railings. A world she'd abandoned for love. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. The people who had rejected her lived with their choices. I lived with hers. One afternoon, while reviewing paperwork, I noticed something odd. A secondary account linked to the trust. Smaller. Separate. I called the lawyer. "That's a contingency," he explained. "Your mother set it aside for one specific condition." "What condition?" "If you ever doubted your worth." I didn't laugh. I closed my eyes. Inside that account was a letter dated for no specific time. Just when needed. I read it that night. "If you're reading this, then someone made you feel small," she wrote. "Remember, you were worth walking away from everything for." I folded the letter carefully. And understood, finally, that what I'd been given wasn't just money. It was certainty. The kind that can't be shaken by rejection or status. The kind that lets you walk away without anger. And as Elena's Table prepared to open its 10th route, as drivers loaded vans with meals meant for final chapters, I realized something quietly powerful. Some people rise by stepping on others. Others rise by lifting quietly. Only one of those lasts. The first time I realized how far Elena's Table had reached, it wasn't through numbers or reports. It was through silence. I was standing in a hospice hallway late one evening, watching one of our drivers, Marcus, former dock worker, 2 kids, permanent limp, kneel beside a woman whose hands shook too badly to hold a spoon. He didn't rush. Didn't talk down to her. He waited, steady and patient, like time itself had slowed out of respect. She smiled at him like he was family. That's when it hit me, this wasn't charity. This was restoration. And restoration has a way of unsettling people who profit from neglect. The first pushback came quietly. Emails from city inspectors. Requests for additional permits. Routine reviews that suddenly arrived weekly. Nothing illegal. Nothing overt. Just pressure, meant to test how much resistance we could handle. I didn't panic. I'd spent years carrying weight without complaint. This was lighter by comparison. I hired compliance teams. Paid above market rates. Documented everything. We passed every inspection. That's when the tone changed. An article appeared online, small publication, anonymous author. It framed Elena's table as an unregulated private initiative and questioned the motives of wealthy individuals entering public welfare spaces. I laughed when I read it. Then I noticed who shared it. Executives. Board members. People whose names were tied to large institutional charities that paid their directors six figures while delivering meals that tasted like cardboard. They weren't threatened by us taking space. They were threatened by us making them look hollow. I didn't respond publicly. Instead, I expanded. 3 new routes. 2 new cities. Partnerships with hospice networks that had been begging for help. When donors asked why I didn't brand everything with my name, I told them the truth. This isn't about me. They nodded politely. But some didn't understand. They would soon. The firm Lena worked for reached out formally a month later. Not to me. To my holding company. They wanted to renegotiate their lease. The tone was different from before, careful, deferential. I approved the renewal at the same rate. No increase. No decrease. Just stability. It unsettled them more than power ever could. Lena texted me again that night. One message this time. I think I finally understand. I didn't reply. Understanding doesn't require confirmation. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened. Volunteers began turning down better-paying jobs to stay with Elena's table. One woman told me, "This is the first place I've worked where no one makes me feel replaceable." Another said, "I stopped dreading Mondays." Those comments stayed with me. Because they echoed something my father used to say after long shifts at the garage. Work isn't supposed to empty you. It's supposed to leave something behind. I started thinking bigger, but not louder. I funded training programs for hospice aides. Legal aid for families navigating end-of-life paperwork. Mental health support for caregivers. Every initiative followed the same rule. If it didn't preserve dignity, we didn't do it. Then came the call I didn't expect. It was from a senior partner at Lena's firm. He spoke carefully, like someone stepping onto thin ice. "Mr. Decker, we'd like to invite you to a private roundtable." Discretion assured. I already knew what it was. They wanted proximity without accountability. "I don't attend closed rooms," I said calmly. There was a pause. "Well, perhaps a private dinner?" "No." Another pause, heavier this time. "Is there a way we can support your mission?" "Yes," I replied. "Pay your junior associates fairly." Silence. Then a quiet, strained laugh. "I'll relay that." They never called again. 6 months after Elena's table launched, a regional hospital network proposed a partnership. They wanted to scale our model. I said yes, but on one condition. All frontline workers would be paid living wages. No exceptions. They balked. Ran the numbers. Came back 3 weeks later. Agreed. That deal changed everything. Within a year, similar partnerships followed. Not because we advertised. Because word travels faster than press. I stayed out of interviews. Out of photos. Out of award ceremonies. The only recognition I accepted was handwritten notes from families who said things like, "He smiled before he fell asleep. She ate because someone cared enough to show up. He didn't die alone." Those were the returns. One afternoon, nearly a year after that hospice delivery, I received a letter. Handwritten. From my grandparents. They asked if we could meet again. I sat with the letter for a long time before answering. Then I wrote back, "I forgive you. But I won't return." It was the truth. Forgiveness doesn't always include access. I visited my mother's grave that weekend. Placed fresh flowers. Spoke out loud for the first time. "I figured it out," I said quietly. "You didn't leave me money. You left me direction." The wind moved through the trees like agreement. That night, I reviewed the trust documents again, every clause, every contingency. And that's when I found something new. A delayed release. Scheduled for 18 months after activation. My heart picked up speed. I called the lawyer. "That's unusual," he admitted. "Your mother designed it herself." "What is it?" "A final directive." The file was sealed until the date passed. I marked it on my calendar. Didn't tell anyone. Some things are meant to arrive only when you're ready to carry them. As Elena's table approached its second year, something else shifted. I no longer felt like I was proving anything. Not to Lena. Not to the world. Not even to myself. I felt aligned. And alignment is dangerous to systems built on imbalance. The last thing I expected was resistance from my past. But it came anyway. From someone I hadn't thought about in years. And when I saw the name on my phone, I knew. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about legacy. I didn't answer the call the first time. I stared at the name until the screen went dark, letting the silence stretch. Some people don't deserve immediate access to your life just because they once had it. The second call came an hour later. Then a text. Ryan. It's important. Please. I knew who it was before I opened it. Lena. I sat at my kitchen table, the same solid wood table I'd chosen on purpose, nothing marble, nothing polished beyond recognition. The apartment around me was quiet, calm, lived in. No echo of excess. No rush to impress. I typed one line back. What is it? The reply came instantly. I didn't know where else to turn. That sentence told me everything. People don't reach out like that unless something beneath their feet has cracked. We met the next afternoon in a cafe near her office. Neutral ground. No power imbalance. No audience. She arrived early. That alone told me how much had changed. She looked tired. Not the fashionable exhaustion she used to wear like a badge, but something deeper. Something that seeps into posture and breath. Thank you for coming, she said. I didn't say I was staying long, I replied, not unkindly. She nodded. Fair. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she exhaled. I was wrong. I waited. About you. About what mattered. About everything. Still, I waited. She looked down at her hands. No manicure this time. No polished armor. Just skin and bone and nerves. I thought success meant insulation, she continued. Protection from ever being vulnerable again. And now? I asked. And now I'm surrounded by people who only value me when I perform, she said quietly. And I don't know who I am when I'm not. I stirred my coffee slowly. You didn't call to confess, I said. You called because something's happening. Her eyes lifted. They're collapsing, she said. The firm. Quietly, but fast. Bad investments. Partners pulling out. Layoffs coming. I nodded once. And? I prompted. She swallowed. They're going to cut the junior staff first. People with kids. People who trusted the firm. I thought maybe you'd help. There it was. Not apology. Not reconciliation. Expectation. I leaned back. Help how? I asked. She hesitated. You have resources. Influence. You. I raised a hand gently. Stop. She froze. I won't rescue a system that burns people to stay warm, I said calmly. But I will help people. Her shoulders slumped. What does that mean? She asked. It means if those associates apply to Elena's table, we'll take them seriously, I said. If they want legal work that protects instead of extracts, we'll train them. But I won't save a firm that taught you to measure human worth by proximity to power. She nodded slowly. I understand. I studied her for a moment. You don't, I said. Not yet. But you might. She didn't argue. That was new. We parted without drama. No closure speech. No reclaimed past. Some endings don't need ceremony. 3 weeks later, layoffs hit the firm. 5 junior associates applied to our legal advocacy branch. All 5 were hired. None were told who approved it. The delayed directive activated on a quiet Tuesday morning. 18 months to the day after the trust first unlocked. I was alone when I opened the file. Inside was a video. My mother sat in a simple chair, sunlight pouring through a window behind her. She looked younger than any photo I'd ever seen. Alive in a way that made my chest ache. If you're watching this, she said softly, then you didn't let bitterness turn you into someone small. I held my breath. I designed this delay because some truths can only land after you've lived them, she continued. Money reveals who people are. Power amplifies it. But purpose is quieter. She smiled. I didn't want you rich before you were ready. I wanted you free. The video ended with one final instruction. Transfer control. Not of money. Of voice. She had set aside funding for something bigger than Elena's table. A foundation not tied to my name. Not branded. Not centralized. A network designed to outlast me. I executed the transfer that afternoon. Distributed leadership. Transparent governance. Worker representation built into every layer. No single point of failure. No hero. Just systems that functioned without worship. That night, I walked through one of our kitchens. Steam rose from pots. Laughter echoed. A driver told a joke so bad it deserved applause just for confidence. And I realized something quietly astonishing. I wasn't needed the way I used to be. And that was the point. Lena sent one final message months later. I took a pay cut. Joined a non-profit legal group. I think I'm learning. I replied with one word. Good. Not forgiveness. Not punishment. Just acknowledgement. Because growth doesn't require validation. Years later, when people asked how I went from working myself into the ground to building something that fed thousands, I gave the same answer every time. I stopped trying to be on anyone else's level. They always looked confused. I didn't clarify. Those who understand don't need explanation. And those who don't, wouldn't hear it anyway. I was never too small. I was simply standing next to the wrong measuring stick. And the moment I stepped away, everything aligned. Not loudly. Not violently. But permanently. If my story stayed with you, don't let it end here. Share it with someone who's been told they're not enough, or who's quietly carrying more weight than anyone sees. Leave a comment about the moment you realized your value didn't need permission, and if you want more stories like this, follow and subscribe so these voices don't get lost in the noise.